All right, so for lesson 2, we're talking about the texture and the structure of the soil. Soil texture is going to combine a whole bunch of different particles, and it's determined with 3 terms. So there's sand or sandy soil. So you should know what sand is. If you've been at the beach, even if you're not at the beach, you may see sand some places around you. That's just depending on the soil type. So sand particles are large, and when you had a lot of water, it's hard to stick together. Then you've got clay. Clays can be very compact. So opposite of sand, they're very small particles. Wet clay is malleable, which means you can form it like Play-Doh, move it around. And silt. Silt particles is kind of the in-between sand and clay. So soils, you want a good soil to contain a good mixture of all of these, clay, sand, and silt. So a soil that contains this are called loam. So loam is kind of the ideal soil, but they can have higher proportion of one texture than others. So you could have like a sandy loam, something like that. That would mean it's a mixture, but it's heavier on the sand, right? So determining soil texture. So you have the tools you need already to determine it, and that's really your hands. So you can tell soil texture by taking a handful of soil and feeling it. So just you can go outside and feel your soil. Sandy soil is going to be really gritty. You can feel those particles. Feels like a sandbox. Silty soil feels like flour when it's dry. Can be greasy when it's wet. Doesn't really run through your hands very easily. Clay feels greasy. It gets even like more slippery and greasy when wet, and it kind of sticks together. Loam has traits of each, with slight greasiness, some grit, and a bit of a floury feel. So it's a combination. So here's a loose soil with some blocky texture. You can see the bigger particles. So another way to tell the texture is you get it a little bit wet. Take a small handful, you put some water in it, and it's called like making ribbons of it. So you just kind of with your hand kind of do this motion, and you try to make a long ribbon with the soil. So sandy soil falls apart. It's not going to make ribbons. So you're able to tell it's sandy. Silt and clay will form a ball. If you try to put that ball into a ribbon, the silt will form a ball, but it doesn't make the ribbon. Clay makes the ribbon. So that's a good standard to use. Soil structure. So it's difficult to change the soil texture. Soil structures can be changed. Soil texture is those particles. Soil structure is the arrangement. So how those particles are together. Soil with good structure has plenty of pores and airspace between the particles of soil. It can be called crumb or granular structure. The soil is relatively loose, it's easy to dig, and it could even be described as fluffy. Soils can be platy, which means they break into horizontal layers or pieces like plates, tectonic plates. Blocky, so they could break into small square blocks, or massive, breaking into big chunks. You want soil that's good to work with, easy to work with. That's a good telltale sign that it's good soil. So soil aggregates, which are bacteria and fungi, and they glue or hold clumps of soil together. So you can personally add, and that's when you go to a soil scientist, they may give you a list of things to add, and you can add organic matter into your soil, and it's going to help that soil's fertility. So various factors can cause difficulties. If you overuse soil, so you just use a lot of heavy equipment on very wet soil, it can just compact the soil and make it remove the oxygen, reducing the airspace. So that's why we like to till it and turn it over. Why does soil structure matter? So it impacts root development and other plant factors. It impacts water storage. So water holding capacity is how much water soil can hold, which is very important, especially in dry areas or even normally wet areas. If a drought happens, you want soil that's able to hold as much of that rain that it can to save it and use it for a day where they're dry. So soil structure is about water retention. Water retention is keeping the water in. So during serious floods, plants are deprived of oxygen and they may die. They get too much water too fast. Topsoil could wash away, leaving debris behind. The plants could even wash away. That's why a lot of people like to have like grass and other things that are going to help retain that topsoil, help root that topsoil in the ground. So think about whenever you had heavy rainfall, what happened? Did you see flash flooding? Did you see big puddles? How long did the soil retain moisture? So how long was it wet? Did it soak it up? You get an idea of soil drainage by watching the soil after a rain. All right, so organic matter. We've kind of touched on this before. Organic matter is made up of plant and animal matter, living and dead microorganisms, and a variety of substances made by those organisms or by the decomposition process. Sometimes we say organic matter is composed of 3 parts. Living, so about 15% is actual living matter. So that'd be bacteria, fungi, protozoa, earthworms, tiny insects. Then there's dead. The dead portion is, compost, manure, and then the very dead, which is humus, not humus. It's very dead, often bound to clay. The organic matter is resistant to further decay. It makes about 70% of soil organic matter. It's not biologically active in any way. It's stable and relatively unchanging. One thing you can do to increase your plant or your soil fertility is compost. You can buy compost, or you can make your own. Just make a compost bin, and you're just gonna add sticks, dead leaves, green plants, vegetable trimmings, maybe even some scraps and water, and you're gonna store it where in like a container with some room to breathe, and turn it over every once in a while, and that soil is going to break down all of those different materials, and basically you're feeding that soil. So more organic matter in your soil means more fertile soil. So if the organic matter goes away, the fertility kind of goes away. So that's why you need to periodically test your soil and make sure you're putting good organic matter back in. And then it's got a little snippet about manure. Manure is animal waste. Farm manure is really common because we have a lot of it, right? So farm animal manure provides nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are the 3 things we need in fertilizer. It's a good organic fertilizer, especially if you're not looking to put in chemicals into your garden.